welcome this day here, and servus to Austria. Wonderful, Joel. Thank you for being here today, and I hope you are going to have an interesting webinar today. The outline for today is going to be pretty straightforward. We are going to talk about specifically enterprise generative AI and processes. We're talking about the architectures that we have with enterprise generative AI, and we are going to break down all of the use cases, or let's say the ways how to interact with the use case, into four main types of generative AI applications, meaning the types of applications that an end user is going to be interacting with. We are going to have a look into the view of organizations. So how does a probably larger scale organization that has many different use cases that they want to try out and evaluate do that, and how does that usually work? And how can we build ourselves a foundation with an enterprise generative AI platform that enables us to do proof of concepts, but also evaluations and rolling out applications with enterprise-grade generative AI at scale. So sorry, this was my wrong mouse. My name is Marcel Müller. I am a computer scientist by trade. I did a PhD in business process management. I've been working in AI since 2014, so now over 10 years since it's 2024. My daily business actually is implementing these AI projects in enterprise, either together with a client who already has an in-house department doing projects in AI, or as an external expert doing it for them. So these are the two main types of interactions that I have seen, depending on the size of the company, but also depending on the focus of a company and what in terms of resources is available there. We have built, together with my team of about 12 people here, we have built an enterprise-grade AI engine, which is called entAIngine, which is a platform for a no-code platform to build these type of applications that can be very, very powerful, very fast. I see a bunch of other people are coming in. Wonderful. Hello to Dubai too. And we are going to have in the next couple of minutes, we plan about an hour, a little bit of a keynote from me. And if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to use the chat functionality in Zoom. I try to have my second eye on my second screen over here. So when you looking to the outside, it's not because I'm bored and I'm doing some Netflix streaming, but I'm looking actually if you folks have any questions related to this topic. And yes, this is how I would like to get started. We are talking today about generative AI. So everything that is in the, let's say, in the broad terms related to something like ChatGPT. So we are not going to talk about today about time series analysis by itself, or anomaly detection, as long as there's no generative AI that is used to feed these type of things. And when we talk about generative AI, most people do have in their mind this connection to ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is a end user interface in front of a large language model. Large language models have actually been around before ChatGPT, even though they were not super good. But what really made this whole class of application so accessible was having an easy to use interface that could help us get something out of a large language model. And that's a chat interface. ChatGPT, we probably all have used that by now, can literally be used by anyone who ever used a messaging application, because the interface is plain simple. You have an input field where you can put something in, and you will always get something out. Not talking about if you get something good out of it or if you get something bad out of it in terms of quality, but you will always get something. And That's the beauty and the curse at the same point in time. And especially when we are in a bigger enterprise, we have to talk about what are the challenges of using a ChatGPT over there, or do we even want to use a ChatGPT type of interface, so meaning a chat interface in our enterprise, or is there not a better way of interacting, so a better type of application that we have? And that's going to be the topic of today. Chatbots like ChatGPT are great if you have creative tasks that are interactive, so that need interaction from you in processes that are always different. So you want to do some ideation, or you want to write a paragraph about XYZ, or you would like to upload a document and do some reasoning on this document. These are processes that have some variation in them and that need some sort of interaction. And for these type of interactions, a chat interface is great because like you would interact with a human with a chat interface, you do it with a large language model. But think now about a different use case. Think about a use case where you have many times a recurring process. So this example that I give you here is Jenny, who is an accountant and who's using ChatGPT for invoice controlling. This process is quite, let's say, repeatable in that sense, and it's per se not really interactive. So how a discussion like that with on ChatGPT looks like is she's uploading her invoice. She says, okay, this is my invoice. Please look through all of the items. Is this 1,249 euros? And takes a little bit of time while she is sitting there waiting for the interface to finish and giving you that nice little text and say, yes, it is. Then she asks about cost centers and can you map it to cost centers? Then she's being asked to upload the cost centers that it is. So it's more like a conversation with an intern than a repeatable process that you do. And that is for Jenny's case here, not really the most efficient thing that we can do. So of course, we already use ChatGPT if you would, let's say if she has 100 different invoices that she needs to check if they're correct and if they're corresponding to the right bookings in their accounting system, that might be a 1-hour task. If you have that without any AI and you have 4 cases of that, or you have 4 times the things, this is then 4 times the time that you need to spend on it. When you do a one-time task with a chat-based AI, you can gain quite a lot of time, but you have to also think about the time that you spend on using that interface to get what you want, and that is not only writing a prompt, but also sitting there and waiting until the completions are there, and iterating, looking into quality errors and making adjustments of what you are doing with this type of application. So if you're using a chat interface 4 times for a case, so for 4 different cases, you have the same things that you need to do 4 times. So you need to write 4 times your prompt, you need to upload your data, you need to do XYZ, you need to wait, you need to control, you need to go for errors. So is that as good as it gets with the efficiency that the efficiency gains that we can achieve with using a generative AI model? And when we look actually into a repetitive task with a chat-based interface, we have the situation that all of the prompt writing, of the quality adjustments, and of the waiting is essentially overhead that we should not have every time for each case, but where we would get a lot of gains if we would have that to do only once and then basically just upload our data and do the process over and over again. So what as an enterprise we have to look for is for applications where we have many different times basically the same thing that we are doing, and we call this repetitive or recurring case-based work. So if you are in operations and you are doing procurement, for example, and you have 500 different suppliers that are coming to you every month, You are going basically through the same process of iterating over documents with them, or of very text-heavy documents with them, but it's always the same process, right? You are looking into what they want in a procurement contract, what they offer to you, make counter proposals to a contract and iterate until you have something like that. When you write project proposals, it's the same thing. You always have to state what you are offering, at which price, give a little bit of background information about you. So this is also a repeatable process. And if we are building templates so that we have always the same prompts, the same orchestrations, the same data retrieving pipelines behind these processes, then we can gain quite a lot more than just what we could get by using an interactive interface where we always have to do something. So if we are analyzing our processes and we are building reusable templates, we have to think about cases, and we have to think about case-specific versus case-independent data. So case-independent data is basically your knowledge base that you can, with retrieval augmented generation, get into your processes. And on the other side, we have case-specific data that might be data related to the very case that you currently have at hand. So data that is always changing from case to case. In the example of Jenny, who's doing invoice controlling, the case-independent data might be the cost centers that this company has and the description of what goes in which cost center. That is data that is always the same. It's context data that you need to know to make a good mapping to cost centers, but the invoice always changes. So this is case-specific data. We need more efficient interfaces than something interactive where we type something, then wait, then type the next step and wait, then type the next step and wait. And if we get that to a point where we look from a bird's eye view and we basically abstract all of these interactions into something that is reproducible, we can also get a lot of improvement in terms of quality and get around a big portion of human error if we do it correctly. So what we really need to do is we need to build an AI-powered application instead of using a chat to do something. And this is where the real value gain looks like. Because when you do that, you have one time the overhead to build this application. And then when you execute it in many, many, many different cases, the only thing that you have to do is the only thing that you have to wait for is the execution time that actually it takes to carry out this orchestration of that template, of that process that you have defined. And this is where the real value gain comes from. And this is the step. There's a lot of people that are in that step where they say, okay, let's do some ChatGPT because it's a nice chat interface. But this is where I draw the line between serious enterprise-grade applications and people that just do some knowledge management and some small one-time efficiency gains. If you want to do it at scale, you have to look for exactly these type of orchestrations. And this is what we are going to talk about today, and the impact that generative AI does with that. When we think about an enterprise-grade model or an enterprise-grade architecture, we have basically always these components that you have here. On the bottom of an enterprise-grade generative AI application, there's some sort of hardware that executes your large language model chat completions or your completions that you do with it. On top of this hardware, the actual models sit. At the moment, we have quite a different, let's say, a large amount of different models that we could use. Everybody knows OpenAI and OpenAI through Azure, which is basically one representative of AI model as a service, which is this little box that you have here. But there's also other ways and other models that you could use. So for example, in tools like Amazon Bedrock or Azure ML Studio, you can have your own models or open source models that you have, like Llama. That's something that I always recommend from Meta, that can be deployed on your own premises if you would like to have that. Or you can build your own model from scratch, but if you're not an SAP or an PwC, I wouldn't recommend doing that because it takes a lot of money. If you have own models, there is a little bit of overhead that you have for operations of these models. And there is what you always have to do is cost monitoring, because each of these interactions with a large language model costs you something. If you go it with an OpenAI API, it costs you a couple of cents depending on how much data you feed into it via the API, or when you have it on your own premises. We are having other challenges like the orchestration and the using and load balancing if you have a lot of things. So on top of that layer in enterprise, there's a layer that I call orchestration layer. So what these AI models that you get out of the box from someone who has already pre-trained them, like in the case of OpenAI, is basically the collective wisdom of the Western world, but not much else. So these models were trained on large corpus of data from Wikipedia articles, from books, from blog posts, from websites that were crawled through the internet to basically give the understanding of language. And people that treat those large language models as a knowledge search might have a very big problem, because large language models can hallucinate. We have another webinar where we are getting deeper into what large language models actually are and why they do hallucinate. But the very short, condensed answer to that is because they're statistical models and they don't have all of the knowledge that you might want to have. You might want to have access to your own company in-house knowledge to answer certain questions or to do certain things, or just to, create a contract based on a contract that you had from last year, or to compare a case of a customer support inquiry with an inquiry that you already had a couple of months ago. And this is where data and orchestration of that data in bigger and more complex processes has to be always a part of enterprise generative AI. So if you are over that step of saying, hey, we use ChatGPT and nothing else. This is where the real value comes in, is if you can orchestrate this probably a large amount of unstructured data in the right time and in the right way to get all of that information into the end product that you would like to have. And combining all of these things together basically feed into applications that we have. And these applications are what we are going to talk today about. And we are going to talk about the 4 different types or archetypes of applications that we have and that we see. And one of them is an AI process automation. You will see here in the next couple of minutes, you will see a bunch of videos that I recorded, which are small excerpts on how our platform that we do, this is all entAIngine, is working. And AI process automation applications basically are multi-step interactions with different types of generative AI that do different things. Here you see that example from the invoice controlling that I gave you, where we define what we call a process template that in the first step has a prompt that goes to GPT-4 Turbo, where we insert a variable. A variable is that case specific data that always changes that I was talking about, and then analyzes the items of this invoice, and in the second step then relates it to the cost centers. So this is a process that can be executed over and over again. And this way of modeling and building a template for this process helps us so that we have always the same prompts, the same orchestration, and not something that you always have to change over with a chat interface. Then we have the chat interface itself. I don't need to talk too much about that. You know how chat interfaces work, but we can also, this is again a video of the entAIngine platform. We can do a chat interface with retrieval augmented generation chat, so where we can adjust your own knowledge base into the interactions that you have with a large language model in that case. So it's RAG plus a model of your choice plus pre and post processing that really make, let's say, a good chat application that helps you in your certain in certain areas. And again, you can build any type of chat application that does whatever you want, but the archetype of the application is a chat application because it's interactive. Then we have knowledge search. which is a very powerful tool that many people often overlook. So, of course, you can upload a PDF to ChatGPT and tell it to explain what happens in this PDF. But the real value of knowledge search is when you can access a lot of different data and search not only by keywords, but do a semantic search on them. And that's the nice thing that embeddings and large language models help us with in combination with vector databases in what we call retrieval augmented generation. Retrieval augmented generation looks basically as follows. You always have here, see in that video, a first step, which is retrieval of information and context information that is relevant to your current question, to your interaction, to your process that you have. And then has, of course, pre and post processing to bring that in the right value. And this is how a retrieval augmented generation search is defined. And then you can use that basically a little bit on the abstract layer, a little bit like a company Google with the thing. And the nice thing about this way of using retrieval augmented generation in favor of fine-tuning is that you can always relate back to the sources where this information that you just got is coming from. And that's the key difference when we're talking about quality, because when you just ask a question to a large language model that doesn't have any type of you can ask it for quotes and citations, but it will just make up citations. That's the thing with these large language models. If you are just looking at them in isolation, there's things like perplexity that do that a little bit better, but which are basically also just one instance of what I've just shown you here with the knowledge search in that interface where you have here first vector store retrieval and then a set of n pure post-processing steps. And the last archetype of application that I always see in enterprises is editor applications. Editor applications are useful in situations where you want to have a document, like a Word document or something else that you can give out as the output of your. And when you are there, and you see here what I'm creating also templates that create documents or where you can interact with certain documents. You are basically working on a different interface where you have on the left side, you have a document that you are iteratively working on. On the right side, you have AI snippets with processes and with templates that you defined. So if you're writing contracts, there's always one specific, I would call it a recipe, how to write the warranty description, depending on what your variables are. 1 year warranty, 2-year warranty, none at all, who is liable for which and what, these type of things. And if we are breaking down this process of creating a document, creating a contract, creating whatever the product is that you want in the end to be out, if we break that down into small little steps and we modularize that and we componentize that, then we can iteratively use them together with an AI and build up this document step by step. That's still much faster than just going for than just doing everything manually, and it gives you really that high control over the things that you do. So if you ever have used Word with text snippets that you put in, text snippets are static snippets, and what we are doing here is basically not static snippets but dynamic snippets with AI. Of course, there's Microsoft Copilot that does things like that, but you don't have really templates or AI snippets in there, but you only have chat where you can do something. And these are basically the 4 types of interfaces or the archetypes of applications that I see wherever I am in enterprises in the industry. And I would say approximately for 90% of all generative AI use cases, you can map it to one of those. They have their benefits and their limitations. I have here a nice little comparison. By the way, if you want to have these slides, just write an email. Emilia, paste the email address in here, please. We can send out these slides, no problem. And we are going to get to all of your questions. So we are right now in the middle of this presentation. So we talked about the 4 types of enterprise generative AI, and I would like to go next into a view on the organizations when we have, when you are an AI leader that has to deal with implementing actually these type of projects and what it means. But in the meantime, I would like to go through the list of questions that I already got here. I got a question from Joel. It would seem very good to add a data sanitation component before orchestration so that you protect your application from prompt leaking attacks or AI manipulation attacks. Joel, absolutely. Data sanitation is a part of orchestration for me. That is that you in each type of situation just have to adapt to whatever the situation is that you have. I completely agree with you. And when we have when we roll out these type of applications in production, this is exactly what we do. But for me, this is part of the orchestration layer. We are talking about governance, I saw. So there is LLM ops, and we have a nice little conversation about LLM ops. It's a very broad topic. Yeah, LLM ops. Are we talking about large language models, so orchestrating and operating the large language model, or are we talking about operating applications with more complex orchestrations on top of large language models? So there's a lot of tools and tasks out there that help you to track basically single individual prompts. But where the real impact is, and that's what I saw in my project, is when you actually when you combine them together in a more complex orchestration level. And I believe that large language model operations or LLM ops is more than just looking into infrastructure and loads and into costs. It should also have an application layer component to that, and an orchestration layer component to that, because there is actually where the value and where the quality is coming from. Other than that, of course, security, costs, and everything that you have more related to infrastructure is important, but many forget about this application layer to LLMs. And we have a few more questions. No, this was Emilia. Wonderful. And some emails who would like to get something. And Brent, we have a question from you. Orchestration frameworks can be highly opinionated. What strategy do you employ to protect your efforts from being shaped by these opinions, e.g., a framework that might bias towards a poor implementation for a problem at hand? I also have a bias because I basically have an orchestration framework. This is my platform that I'm selling. What I always recommend is looking from it a little bit more from the broad perspective, or decide that you go for a single use case orchestration framework. So if you have a very specific, well-defined use case where you know that there is one specific framework out there that will help you, you need to analyze and see if that helps you more than it causes you trouble. If you are looking at it more on a broader scale, where you are like, I talk to a lot of people that are heads of AI or that have larger generative AI initiatives in bigger companies under them, who have the challenge that they don't have one use case, but who have several use cases. Like I'm talking to companies that have like 150, 200 use cases. Then doing a case-by-case decision on what frameworks you are using is not really helping. Then you need something that scales. And that is the perfect segue into our next part. And that's the typical enterprise generative AI journeys that I have seen now with a lot of different customers. So let me tell you a little bit here from experience and what the pitfalls are. So usually there is some sort of decision.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Here is one Mr. Tukral that has another question for you before we go into the second part of the webinar.
Who?
Dr. Rishi, it's Mr. Rishi Tukral.
Good. you talk, Rishi, you talk about what about generating content for employee training purposes for a source of internal knowledge base of documents. We will talk about that in the end. I think I'm going to touch on that in my next cases anyhow, and I'm going to get into the next batch of sections after this questions after this next segment. So what I've seen with typical enterprise AI, generative AI journeys is that there is usually some sort of decision that comes from a higher level in the management where someone says, yeah, we do stuff with AI now. You know, we saw this ChatGPT thing, can't we use that in our organization? Of course, there's much more behind it than just getting everybody a ChatGPT subscription and calling it a day. But usually there is some sort of decision that this is a focus now. And then in larger organizations, usually the least problem that people have is that they have lack of idea. So there is an overflow of ideas, what people would like to try out and how they would like to better. And that's really in human nature, because in the end, generative AI applications are meant to make your life easier. And everybody who works wants to have, in the end, an easier life. So everybody in organization level has an incentive to think about these type of ways and how we do it. And that's fun. They like it. It is exciting to not always do your day-to-day work, but always also think about how you could make your day-to-day work better. So we are, when we look on it on a more broader scale, we have more use cases than just one that are potentially good use cases. But the thing is, we as companies, we have limited amount of resources, time, people, money, whatever it is. And we need to pick our battles. We need to analyze what of these use cases are the most and the biggest impactful and which of them are worth spending our time with. And what I always do in this situation, I advise people to do a mapping, analyze your current process and put numbers to it. How many times a year do you do the same process? How long does it take you per process instance or per case? And who do you have doing this process? Based on that, you have an internal hourly rate. You do that. You multiply that with the amount of minutes per case, and then multiply it by the amount of cases that you have a year, and then you have a more or less big number where you know how big the potential pain point of that is. And then of course, you have to say, okay, this is the as is, but if I do it with AI, how much better is it? It can vary between 30% and 80%. Sometimes it doesn't work at all, but this is where a proof of concept is needed. But if you need a starting point, just assume that you are getting 50% more efficient in that specific case if you are going with an AI application. Yeah, you can also assume something different, but always take something so that you have something to work with. Then you funnel that down. So some of the cases where, someone is very passionate about, writing the birthday letters and newsletters to anyone. In the end, this is something that you do once a week and that it takes you 5 minutes. There is no point in doing a 15,000 euro proof of concept to automate that. But on the other hand, if you have a proposal writing and if you have matching your offers and your products with things from RFQs and you do 5,000 RFQs a year, and for these 5,000 RFQs, each RFQ usually takes you 3 hours and you can cut that in half, well, that's quite some impact. That might be interesting to go and start a POC. And in that POC, you have to define how are you going to implement that and which of the 4 archetypes of a generative AI application fits best in here. That's where we come back to the first step. And then, of course, you have to evaluate that. So there's no point in building a proof of concept and then saying, oh, it looks good. You need to evaluate that, and you need to evaluate it in a larger scale than just one person looking there and saying, yeah, it's cool. You need to be able to say, okay, from 15 minutes per case, because there is some more manual work needed, but I could cut most of the time in that case. The manual work is only 3 minutes, so I could get it down by 12 minutes. That's the productivity improvement. That's the efficiency gain that you then got with that very specific POC. and you can calculate the economic impact. That's not higher math. We also have an Excel template for that. If you are interested to have this Excel template, or me helping you to tell you how this works, it's basically just you calculate the hours times the price per hour that you have in internal costs, times the amount of cases per year, before and after, and the delta is basically what you have. And also in a bigger organization, there's also stakeholders involved that have that look into that and look, see, these couple of thousand euros that we invested in doing that. What does that mean if we are rolling it out in production? Is there a cost saving to it? And usually, if the cost saving is clear, then there is a point on bringing that to production. And this is where we have to then integrate the proof of concept, get it to a next level of maturity into a productive system with all that is to it. And then we finally reach productive use in that case. So, and let me now tell you a little bit about the pitfalls that I have seen in this thing. If you are an organization that has more use cases than just one or two, think about a tech stack, a tool, a platform based on which you can build 50 use cases using the same thing, and not building 50-point solutions with 50 different things, and you have 50 different teams that all code differently. This will be a mess to maintain. It will be a mess to integrate, and you will waste a lot of time by doing things twice. So if you are in that organization and you have to think that you have 50 or even 20, 50, 100 use cases under you, look for ways to scale. Look to have a platform on your organization that also includes data, that also includes the whole governance behind it, where you can build these type of applications. Don't build throwaway proof of concepts. Try to have the connection between the production phase and in POC as small as possible. Don't say, okay, we built now something, we did some prompts, and then we throw it away and we give it to an external contractor to build it again for production. No, you do a lot of learning in iteration in these proof of concepts, and the more that you take these learnings and you bring it to a production phase, the higher or the faster the value is that you get. So take it as a continuous process from the idea to prioritization to production. People in the beginning just are there with this attitude of playing around because there's AI, let's understand what it is. You don't get anything from just playing around if you don't provide your people with a concrete objective what to do. So the objective could be make our customer support more efficient. Yeah. If you give people anything, they will just play around but not come to anything. But with clear objectives and boundaries, they can still live out their creativity, but you can ensure that what you get out in the end is something that is being very, very on point. And this is also where you need to educate, where you need to give people material. So that was your question, Rishi, where you need to get in and upskill them to the way if you are going for the we build it ourselves on a larger scale. Don't think that every solution is unique and then you need to reinvent something because what you're doing is so super special. I know that might sound a little bit harsh, but 90% of the applications you can map to these 4 application types of generative AI applications. There's standard interfaces. We built one of them. We only have to define the processes and you get something out that populates these standard applications. When you have something that has a lot of cases, you should worry about the costs of these AI completions right from the beginning. Cost monitoring is something that you need to start very early on and optimize from the beginning, and not just say, oh, we are going to worry about costs earlier. Because if each of your cases costs you €1.20 to process, and you have 5,000 cases, this is significant costs. If you say, yeah, we'll make that better later, but while you're trying to make the costs better, you get the quality down, there's some sort of a problem that you have. And the earlier you start looking into costs, the better it is when it comes to evaluation. And a lot of people, and that is tying good into this discussion with LLM ops that we had, a lot of people focus so much on the model. Honestly, if you have GPT-4o, if you have or GPT-4 Turbo, or even if you have Llama, the quality of what these models can do in terms of their capabilities are almost similar. Like there is not a lot of differences between the two things. There's huge differences between cheaper models, but there is much more value to gain by looking into the orchestrations end to end. You can gain much more than by building indexing your vector database differently, doing a better retrieval re-ranking structure than swapping one model from the other. So focus on the orchestration end to end and not just on the model. Yeah, people think, okay, this model is good, this model is crap. No, in most of the cases, it's the model is good or bad for you if the prompt and the data orchestration that you have around it is good or bad. This is what it breaks. All of these models can produce good quality English language. One of them is good, is better or worse at reasoning. One of them is better or worse at maths. Yes, there are differences, but there are much more things and much more value to be gained by focusing on the orchestrations first and then thinking and the model second. So that's my key pitfalls and objectives that I would like to go through that. And the very last thing is testing. Don't only test in small samples by a manual user, quantitatively evaluate what you have in the end, make automations wherever it's possible so that you have a good number where you can say, yeah, we tested this in 1,000 cases. And with this accuracy, we reduced the time that we needed for these type of applications in these type of cases by X by Z%. Then you can actually work with the structure and we can implement. And what I recommend is to have one unified platform that combines your data sources, of course, in the partitions, in the buckets, in your governing structure that you have. So not throwing everything in a bucket, but basically makes these connections so that you use the same stack for everything. You can build this orchestration yourself, or you can buy an external solution, or you have a hybrid solution. That's what I'm doing. We have a platform that you can use that connects you basically to a lot of different models, and that we can also deploy completely on premise, and that has a no-code interface that you have seen in my applications before. Based on which you can very fast build these type of applications and also put them into production. Has an API, can be integrated to anything, has proprietary or open source models for text, image, and voice. Fine-tuning and retrieval, augmented generation built in, and that low-code app builder that works within the corporate structure. And incidentally, that platform that I built together with my company and that I've currently rolled out as the standard platform for a couple of large-scale enterprises that do a lot of their application building and execution with that, like that very much in that way. So yeah, this is what my learnings were from working on these type of projects for the last 2 years, basically since generative AI came out. I hope you could learn a little bit about the pitfalls that I've been doing. If you are interested to learn more, I'm going to go through all of your questions in a second. If you're interested to learn more, it's at my company at entAIngine with our platform, we have 2 models. We either build these type of applications with our platform for you, or we enable you to build yourself by licensing our platform to you, setting up pipelines, upskilling your people, not only in prompt engineering, but also in orchestration and pipeline building, etc. And that's basically what I do in my daily life. And if that's something that you are interested in, where you not only want to go on your own, but where you look for help, I'm more than happy to help. Here is a link to my Calendly that I'm more than happy to give to you if you would like to have a 30-minute meeting with me. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing if you think we can help. So now I am going through all of the questions that I got. Okay, slides, wonderful. We got all of that, and we have Ian. Ian, how does your company approach AI ethics on the behalf of customers? Well, AI ethics, the first thing that you have to do is you have to educate. You have to educate and you have to tell people that basically there is no good or evil in AI. The AI just gives you back whatever it was trained on. Yeah. And I said in the very beginning, ChatGPT or the OpenAI GPT 4.0 model was trained on the combined general knowledge of the Western world. So if you have something that is wouldn't be considered a Western world, you might have different views on that. These models, they have bias and there might come something out of that. You need to be aware of this bias and you need to never get into that point where you are trying to anthropomorphize an AI as if it would be a human being. It's a piece of statistics that is bringing something out based on what it was trained on. And this is the basics for all of these ethics that you have to think about. Then there is stuff related to data privacy, to security, to other things. But for the ethics part, I think having that and evaluating if what you get out of that is helping you for your use cases and applications is for me the absolute core thing that we need to do.
Dr. Muller, we also have a question from Sanjay. I can read it for you. It's up in the conversation. We have a lot of messages. So the question is, how do you handle situations where executives are happy with the POC and want to use it manually rather than launching into full automated production?
I mean, there's no problem with that, right? If they want to use it manually, let them use manually. So this, let me show you what we have here. So if you can use all of these things that we also built here on our platform, even though you created it with no code, you can use it in production. There is nothing that holds you back. So if there is no point or no need or no want to do an integration to existing systems, just use it in isolation. There's no problem of that whatsoever. Joel, thank you for your input. Yeah, LangChain, LangGraph, of course, I know them, but they have some interesting limitations and benefits, and also a very interesting business model that I'm not very fond of. But this is just my opinion about LangChain. Sanjay, I guess the problem would come when the users actually aren't actually adopting to technology. Yeah, I mean, in the end, if users are adopting the technology or not is on one hand related to the interface and the ease of use, but on the other hand, also if they want to do it or not. So if people are afraid that AI will take over their job, you might have this type of resistance, and then you might have people that don't want to use it at all. What I do in that type of situation is that I educate about that AI is not here to replace them, but just to make the company more efficient so that they can handle more cases, and everybody is going to benefit from that. So there's a lot of, let's say, managing people in easing, let's say, their barriers to adoption, either on a user interface view or on a mental view on that. That's my...
Could I add a comment to what you said there for Sanjay? I think an important thing whenever you're trying to change something within a company, and so you're talking specifically about implementing AI here, is you got to identify change advocates, people who within the organization are going to help you move the group towards what you're trying to do. So in this sense, if you're going to take on an AI project and you're going to want your users to do it, you should involve those advocates, whether they're like pessimists who you think are not going to be on board with it, or people who are really pro. You should get a good mix, and that should be part of a little project group that you keep internally as you go through this process of creating the application, creating the solution. You'll find that the negative person or personalities will come around to it, or they understand it better. Because sometimes, like Dr. Marcel's highlighting, it's a concern about what this is going to do. Is it going to replace my job? But once they are actively engaged in the development of the project and they know it, and they can ask their questions throughout, once you come to deploy it, they will be change advocates for you. They will be the ones talking to the other employees and saying, hey, use this, it's great. Look, I'll show you this feature. It'll help. So I think that's where when you're doing these things, you look for a user group and you make sure you get a broad range within that user group, people who are positive and negative towards it. You can't just go with everyone that's going to be like on board with it. You need to find the people that are going to have the most trouble too. That's it.
Exactly. This is something that I have seen very many times. I like the term change advocates. Yeah, get people to not be afraid of what you're doing by taking them by the hands and help them see how you're creating it. And if they feel like this application that you built with them is their child, it's less that they will lobby for it internally. That's what I see. I saw just a question from earlier about caching. Of course, there's caching of these type of interactions that you have with large language models. Yeah, like I could get in this model, I could get much more deeper. And of course, there is here an API gateway. And of course, there is some sort of balancing and load balancing of the orchestration engine and replicating and so on and so forth. And for me, caching, stuff like caching, security things are typical components that you have in any type of application, never mind if it's AI or not. I didn't put them into this part, but of course, caching is part of making some applications that scale over here. In the same way, like the orchestration is, in the same way, like data sanitation is. But this is just, let's say, I would say a normal obstacle and nothing that is specific to generative AI itself. Good, Lou, you have a question. I have a question as to how this translates to image AI. In a sense, during the evaluation phase, how would you go about automating something inherent visual and output, specifically image outputs in a text-to-image pipeline? Or how does this apply to LLM Gen AI specifically with these 4 archetypes approach? Good question. Image models are indeed tricky. Yeah, image models, because text is relatively simple to evaluate. Images, or the quality of an image, is quite hard to evaluate. In my 4 types of applications, I would say that only the AI process automation applications are really something where you are creating in the end an image, or maybe you create an image and insert it in an editor application. That's maybe the 2 types of applications. Evaluating the quality and how good an AI generated image is really hard at this point in time. I completely agree with that, but there is a lot moving in the space, since lately also generative video models are picking up the pace. So I anticipate that in the next 4 to 6 months, there is going to be quite a lot changing in that space. So we have Alex. Can you comment at all on the split between Gen AI and more traditional AI ML solutions that don't use LLMs? Is there a crossover where Gen AI solutions can start to perform some of the simpler ML model selection and training optimization steps? Let me know if that's out of scope. Alex, can you explain a little bit more to me what you have? So, for example, if I would like to use an LLM to evaluate if my classification model that I built with just a traditional deep neural network is performing good or bad, or what is it that you're thinking about?
Yeah, it's that sort of thing, but potentially even like a step earlier to try and feed some of the more raw data into like some of these solutions and say, maybe you prompt it in the way of the types of models you want to use or the types of outputs you want to see. But I'm wondering, when are we going to get to the point, or is there already some scope where you can sort of, for simpler solutions, take out some of those steps in terms of, like you say, using a classification model and then training it and sort of fine-tuning it or optimizing it? Can you sort of feed a bunch of data into it? Because I know there's data analytics capabilities in like GPT-4 and things now. I don't know if you've just seen much of that.
Yes, you have to see that GPT-4 is not only a large language model, but it's basically an ensemble model of different types of models in there. And one of the types of models that you have in what you get through ChatGPT is a code model that is there to interpret code and to translate code. In the same way, there is also a model that is we call that ChatGPT, but we don't really see what's under the hood. But it's a different type than just a model that can understand language. So I believe that this is a little bit the question of where are we on the route to AGI, and do we want even to get there? And there is vastly different opinions on that. What I recommend at this point in time, if you have something where you want to be sure that it is good, the more you break it down into small compartmentized steps and you optimize these steps, the better the quality of your output is. It's the same way, like when you just upload a 100-page document to ChatGPT and say, hey, tell me about this, this, and this, and this. You have the thing with large context, you have the problem that many of these models are not very good at the needle in the haystack problem. So finding the right piece of context in a large amount of data. Of course, if you have a small excerpt of your data, small CSV, and you say, hey, generate basically an aggregation that makes the sum in one column, and then make some sort of a filter in the other one, that works good. And there's models that can do a lot of very good data analysis. But I can't tell you when we are there where we have just this super thing that will just evaluate itself and program itself. I can't tell you that. There's vastly different opinions in there. Some people say we are 5 years away. Some people say we are 30 years away. Some people say with what we are doing right now, like the way how our large language models are, we will never get there. So it's depending on who you ask at this moment. Good. I see Alex being happy. We have a question. When using a company guru and the knowledge is stored in a company-wide document management system, how and where are the access rights to the content managed? I can show you. Company guru, this is, you're talking now about the specific product. So we made here a company guru for a company in the Netherlands, but we can make a company guru for everybody. And for each company guru, we have different company guru processes. And one of these processes is here, for example, sorry, this was the wrong, is the introduction write-in. And we should think of each of these processes as basically one way of searching. Yeah. And that one way of searching is taking knowledge base A and a request and processes it in that way. And we can associate this process of search that is behind the company, behind a company guru, that very specific search process, we can associate that to an organizational unit. So we have here an enterprise system. This is a company that only has one unit, but if you have here subunits, we can associate that to them. So that means that we only make the data accessible to the business units that see it. And if we have other business units that should only see other data, then we have a different search template like you have here. And we can then in our company guru, we can then here have a different search pattern that we have. And that's how I would always get it. Don't just throw everything in once, because once everything is in once, you can't ever turn it out again. Or you could, at every case, you could say, okay, check the source of that answer and say if the person is allowed to see that answer or not. But I strongly recommend thinking in these little partitions and then aggregating these partitions again into bigger groups and really funneling down your enterprise group management that you already have and your organizational units with the business units that you have, instead of trying to figure out which information comes from where and does do what. Okay,
thank you.
Did that help you?
Yeah, at least the first information, which is helpful.
If you have questions like that and we should get a little bit deeper and you don't want to discuss it completely in public, feel free, Emilia, send again the Calendly link. We can.
I already booked a meeting.
You already booked. Great, great, wonderful. Because these are the really fun cases. These are the really fun cases where it gets a little bit more challenging and interesting. Thank you all for your attendance today.